yours, sir. You can have a sit down or you can have a stand up.
Thank you so much. How's everybody doing this morning? Awesome. First and foremost, I want to thank the Cannabis Alliance and for everyone in the room for being here. This is exactly the type of dialogue that we need more of, and it is an absolute pleasure to be all the way up here in the far Northwest. My name is Hezekiah Allen. I am a third-generation cannabis grower. I owned and operated my own commercial cannabis facility until 2012, at which point the ongoing pain and trauma of losing friends either to violent criminals or to jail cells, and the dishonesty and lack of integrity that I felt by having to lie constantly about who I was and what I did became too much, and the cumulative impacts of those things inspired me to do something somewhat crazy and uproot myself from my off-the-grid rural homestead and lifestyle and move to Sacramento, ultimately to engage with the state legislature, the state regulators, and now we are looking, and we've got chapters in 12 counties, dozens of local government projects. California is a big state, and as the executive director of the California Growers Association, I think that together, our movement, several hundred business owners, we are fundamentally changing the dialogue in California. And it's very exciting to be able to share some of that with you, but most importantly, to share the values that drive the work that I do. I'm a very values-driven person. I think it's shared values with Jed, with David, with several of the other board members up here that brought us to this place today. And so the first value is togetherness. And I always like to take a moment to focus on togetherness. I think it's very important for us to acknowledge that this place and these natural resources were here long before our nation, long before our country and our civilization. And I always like to give thanks for that, for people that have been here, that have been stewards, that have loved and cared for these places long before we were here. I think it's important also to acknowledge that it's been challenging to get here. Civil respect and negotiated compromise have not always been our strong suit as a species. That said, it is a brave new future. We are here talking openly about cannabis, and there's a more significant importance to that than just simply talking about a plant. In my opinion, cannabis is really the catalyst for this coming to terms with our past and ultimately opening the mind and heart to really embrace our future and to embrace it for all that it can be. But I guarantee to you that we will not realize that future if we don't do it together. And you'll feel this, I think, embedded over the next, 30 minutes that you guys get to listen to me talk. The second thing that I can really say by way of values is focus. We've got an estimated 50,000 independently owned cannabis businesses in the state of California. To get all of them to focus on any single thing is impossible. I'm a firm believer in anything's possible, but not that. That said, what we were able to do, and I'll talk a little bit about 2015 and 2016 in California, some of the specifics that we're facing, but we boiled down 400 small business owners' aspirations into 3 bullet points, 27 words, and because of that, we were able to get all of them into legislation. I was told I was delusional, I was told we were crazy, I was told that it was a cult and that nothing was ever going to come of it. That said, we are now negotiating regulations on policies that we wrote. And so that focus was very important. But clarity, 27 words, literally the entire legislative agenda for last year from our perspective was 27 words. And that focus and that clarity made it possible for us to communicate something that I think is beyond the scope of imagination and understanding. For somebody that's never been to a small homestead, that's never seen what a cannabis farm can look like, it's literally beyond the scope of imagination. And so later on when we talk about agriculture and the larger agricultural challenges facing our civilization, our society, and ultimately our planet, I think the unimaginable solutions really are on the cannabis farms and really are available to us in that culture that arises between polyculture and multi-cropping with cannabis as a backbone. A few other things that we really focused on: courage. absolutely critical right now that we have the courage to stand up, to come into the light, and to embrace the future that we know is possible. We know it's possible because we've been living it, but we have to have the courage to bring that to the whole wide world. And you know, I know that there's this thing that we can say, oh, the war is over. You know, I don't experience it that way. We had 8 members have children younger than age of 3 taken from them at gunpoint in 2015 alone in California. 8 small farmers losing children to armed and masked law enforcement agents. The war is not over, from my perspective. And having the courage to talk about the future openly, to talk about our dreams and aspirations, in spite of that risk, it's very challenging, but nothing will move forward without it. So to everyone in this room for being here and for having the courage to be who you are and to talk to each other openly and respectfully, I want to express my gratitude and my respect to all of you. It's very encouraging. Partnership. It sounds a lot like togetherness, but partnership takes on a really different meaning. When we're looking at every investment and venture capital fund in the world looking to get into California's multi-billion-dollar marketplace, or even some of the smaller marketplaces in the Pacific Northwest. Just teasing. And so, there's this fear that arises when a lot of our members and the business owners see this new energy and this new influx. For longer than I've been on this planet, there's been a concern that it would be regulated or legalized and that somebody would take it away. And so rather than giving into that fear, it's important to once again rally that courage and to find ways to structure these new energies, new resources with the heritage, the culture, and the tradition, and to make sure that we're bringing these two streams of resources, of thought, energy, and imagination together. Because once again, the foundation of all of this is togetherness. The foundation of all of this is being open and finding mutually agreeable solutions for our future. And lastly, a value and a theme that I'll touch on several times through the course of the day is sustainability. This is about more than consumables. This is about more than getting high. This is about more than, drinking some beers and smoking a joint on Friday night. I don't think I need to tell any of you that. This is about fundamentally shaping and changing the way that we interact with agriculture and the way that agriculture interacts with our economy and our society. There is so much that is possible if we open our minds to this and really dive in to this future. So those are the values that we really resonate on values. We actually take the time at the beginning of our meetings to outline what the value that we're putting into it, what our intention is, and what we're taking away. So togetherness, focus, clarity, courage, partnership, and sustainability is what I'd like to invoke today as we dive into some more details. So the California Growers Association. I know that we're not here to learn about California policy, but I do feel somewhat responsible to share a little bit about it because that's what I do every single day, night, waking hour, sleeping hour, etc. We are an association of cannabis farms and businesses in California. We started in 2009 as Mendo Grown, 2010 Humboldt Growers Association, 2012 merged and formed the Emerald Growers Association. And actually, just over the last 6 months, we made the decision, reflecting a growth in our membership, to make the transition to the California Growers Association. It is an amazing challenge to take a small third-generation heritage homestead farm in the hills of Humboldt County and make them see eye to eye with an 80,000 square foot warehouse grow in downtown Long Beach. But that is the scope of our challenge. And so these values, it becomes a little bit more apparent why we're so deliberate and conscious about invoking these values, because we do face legitimate and real challenges just talking to each other every single day. And if we can't talk to each other, my goodness, we stand no chance of talking to regulators, to law enforcement, to folks that, in my experience, are ready to see what we know, but have to be, we have to communicate clearly, again. And we can't do that if we can't stop fighting with ourselves. And so we primarily work, on public policy. There's 4 areas of public policy that are of critical importance in California. I think it's true here as well. We work in the legislature, that is our primary focus. We work with regulatory agencies. We work at the local level, working on land use ordinances and permitting processes. And of course, we also work in electoral politics, which last year meant candidates and this year means initiatives. Last year, I mentioned our focus, 3 bullet points. Ray, you mentioned in the beginning wine. One of the reasons why wine has been able to flourish and why the small vineyards and small wineries still exist is because of appellation controls. The ability to protect regions of origins, specific cultures, microclimates, and cultivars. Well, California established the framework for appellation controls for cannabis. That was one of our 3 priorities, and so over the next 2 years, we expect to be working with the California Department of Food and Agriculture to establish a system of appellation controls that will allow the market to recognize the different areas, the different cultures, the different sets of standards that the growers choose to impose upon themselves. It's a very exciting process, putting, merging the lines between business and marketplace, between public policy and private sector solutions, where the growing community will get to decide how and what standards will go into their label and their brand and move that forward, governing it themselves. The second thing that was very important to us was that we avoid a one-size-fits-all licensing structure and fee structure. Like I said, with 24 plants on an outdoor homestead to 80,000 square feet of warehouse in Long Beach, we've got a very diverse cultivation sector. And it was very important for us to have specific licensing tools for each specific size of business. But we went another layer of resolution as well and created licensing categories for indoor, for mixed light, and for outdoor, so that each specific type of growing will have its own conversation. Believe it or not, when I said that it's impossible to get everybody to talk together, it really kind of is sometimes, and so this was a way of solving that. By giving each in-group and each focus group of cultivators their own license, I don't entertain the concept of a small outdoor grower trying to write rules for large indoor growers. That's not theirs. We can worry about that later. For now, everyone needs to be constructive, proactive, and focus on building the rule sets that they need for their license. And by ensuring that each license type was specific enough and identified a core in-group, we've been able to bring some semblance to that conversation. The last, and I think most important policy breakthrough that we enjoyed in California, and I think this is the one that will likely have the most reverberative effects around the nation, is that we designated cannabis as an agricultural product. This is the first time this has been achieved in the country. This didn't come easily. We had a senator in a joint committee that I testified to in August say, we will not recognize cannabis as agriculture until I'm out of office, dead, or mute, I think were his exact words. Literally, we face staunch opposition from every sector, from within the industry itself, from traditional agriculture, from law enforcement. But at the end of the day, there's one value that I forgot to mention that you'll hear a bit about today, and that is truth. The truth is, cannabis is an agricultural product. Try as we might, we can't undo that. And so to recognize that truth in policy, I think, is very, very encouraging. This simple designation opens the door to 100 different programs. California, obviously a leading ag producing state, sustainable ag resource, organic pest management. There's all these research and incentive programs, ag co-ops, producer co-ops, farmers markets. There's about 100 different ways that farms and agriculturalists are provided not only protection under the law, but are promoted by the law. And so from my perspective, when I see the Food and Ag Code of the state of California that says this code and this department will exist for the promotion and protection of agricultural productivity, it is a fundamental paradigm shift from the way that I've always looked at the world and viewed my role in it. The state of California now exists to protect and promote the productivity of our membership. And that is a huge breakthrough, and one that I really do hope we'll see moving across the country and through other states. The ag departments of every single state have tremendous expertise and have tremendous tremendous value to bring to our conversation, and hopefully we can assert them into a more central role. We're happy to talk more about specifics of how we might do that sometime at a later time. So great, this is all well and good, right? Policy, we did some cool things, it's fantastic, but why? Fundamentally, the reason why is because cannabis makes us well. It brings wellness to ourselves as individuals. It brings wellness to our communities, and it can bring wellness to our political system and our economic system. And the reason that I fundamentally believe this is because in my experience, cannabis has opened me. It's opened me to possibilities. It's opened me to what's possible inside of myself, as well as what's possible in shared space, in this communal space. And so as we move forward, it's important to me, and I hope it's important to every one of you, that we not lose track of that fundamental reason why we're all here. Because cannabis has made us well, or has made somebody that we know well. Whether it's a late-stage cancer patient who can't be cured but can feel better about it, whether it's a veteran of combat that is, suffering with cocktails of pharmaceuticals and finds reprieve in cannabis, whether it's a child with seizures that can only see the world peacefully and harmoniously with cannabis. But it's not just about consumables. This is about fundamentally changing not only ourselves, which we all agree can happen because we're here, but it's also about changing the way that we interact with the world around us. And so when we look at the challenges, the larger challenges, let's take a step back outside of cannabis. Has anybody heard about climate change? Okay. Anybody heard that there's a drought in California? We haven't had water for about 5 years. Food insecurity. We're the most wealthy nation on the planet, yet I think it's close to 30% of children are food insecure in our country. And so we start looking at how fragile and delicate this brave new world that we've built is. Yeah, I can get on a plane out of Sacramento at 9 o'clock last night and be here, no problem. It's amazing. But at the end of the day, it's also, sort of a shell. There's a lot going on inside of that that's unsustainable, that lacks the resilience that we need to depend on it. And to make that worse, we're facing dramatically changing conditions. What was normal 50 years ago from a climate perspective will not be normal going forward. And so this word resilience, it's a very important word, and it runs in the face of a lot of conventional economic wisdom and a lot of conventional, what we've built our society on for the last 150 years particularly. Resiliency is built on redundancy. It's built on having multiple units serving the same function in a system. That's inefficient. Inefficiency has been hunted and killed like the plague over the last 150 years. Our economies have worked to increase efficiencies, thus to increase returns. Oftentimes those efficiencies come at the expense of two things: natural resources and people. Whether it's consumer safety from lower quality goods, or it's workers losing their jobs from outsourcing or moving jobs to more efficient places. Efficiencies have led to ultimately a very, very streamlined system, but one that doesn't afford us a lot of wiggle room, and one that doesn't necessarily put us or our natural resources and our planet on equal par with that profitability. And so how does this relate to cannabis? Because cannabis is economically viable on a small scale. Cannabis can provide the economic backbone to a small-scale diversified farm. Why is that important? Well, it's not often that I quote the World Trade Organization and the United Nations High Commission for Trade and Development, but since 2013, I find myself looking to them more and more often. I'm not sure how this report slipped through the cracks with so little attention, but it fundamentally changed my perspective, because for the first time, the New World Order, right? Terrifying, I know, was on our side. And there's a report from 2013 that says, wake up before it's too late. Small-scale sustainable agriculture is the only way to feed the world. There's, again, truth. You can't deny truth. Large-scale agribusiness will not serve our society much longer. It's not to say that I blame or fault anyone. It's not to say that I don't understand how we've gotten here. but it is to say unapologetically and unequivocally that we need to fundamentally change the way agriculture works, the way that we interact with natural resources, the way we interact with cultivation. You know how we won World War II? Victory gardens. Not to hearken to the war, I know we're all a bit traumatized, but it took decentralized agricultural productivity on every block in order to win that and triumph in that epic struggle. I can tell you this in no uncertain terms. What we're facing in the next 50 years is more severe, is more extreme, is a bigger challenge, and poses a greater existential threat to our civilization. And if we can't fundamentally accept the gravity of what we're dealing with, then, unfortunately, we probably won't make the transition. But we will, because we found cannabis. Now that we found it, we're going to really embrace it for what it is. And like I said, it's not just a joint. I love joints just as much as anybody else. But this is about so much more than that. This is about fundamentally accepting that our responsibilities as people, as citizens, as residents, fundamentally as living beings in this most miraculous of planets that we found ourselves on, that our responsibility is to do more than just profit. It's to do more than just build a successful business. It's to work together and to pioneer and advance sustainable, resilient, dare I say it, inefficient agriculture systems, so that if there is a flood or a drought in California and we can't feed the Northwest anymore, that's okay, because you can feed yourselves and you can help us a bit too. And that's going to be very, very important going forward. So one of the things we talk about in California a lot is an acceptance and an acknowledgement that the way that the cannabis industry has been structured during Prohibition, or in our case, during 2 decades, 2 years, as though that's a dramatic time frame, 2 decades of regulatory uncertainty. 1996, we partially legalized medical cannabis in the state of California. 19 years later, we still do not have the ability to lawfully cultivate. Anybody. Every single gram that's grown in California is technically grown illegally. That'll change now that we passed this legislative package in 2018. That will change, thank goodness. But there's 2 paths forward. The Prohibition era farms aren't going to work. It's a broken system. There's no transparency. The supply chain doesn't work. You can't get products from the North State to San Diego. That's why we see so much diversion out and so much diversion in. I look forward to a time when we can trade freely. Let's take our time and get there. Incremental progress is important. I do look forward to that time. But for now, we are looking at state units because of the federal state challenges. And we do need to change the way that we cultivate in California. We do need to acknowledge that markets need larger lots and greater consistency. And so there's 2 pathways forward. There's the conglomerate path and there's the cooperate path. There's, I'm going to build mine and I'm going to work with you. And I'd like to ask fundamentally today that everyone in the room embrace the spirit of cooperation. Because moving forward, we're going to need it, not just in the cannabis industry, but in everything that we do. These challenges are very serious, and there are entrenched interests that like the status quo. So we're going to move forward together. Now, what does that look like? Well, fundamentally, from my perspective, there's an important acknowledgement to make. I work on public policy. That's a very important piece of this. But there's also a cultural element. We fundamentally, in California, we fundamentally have to acknowledge that, more than half of the counties didn't pass Proposition 215. Vast majority of the counties voted Prop 19 down. While the public was ready to embrace us in a limited sense, the public is still not there yet. Reefer madness, that shit stuck with us. That got pretty deep into our cultural mentality and psyche. This is cultural. And so yes, it's important that I'm in every single committee with every single lawmaker 10 times a year, but more important, in my opinion, is that every single one of you embrace who you are, that you carry yourself, not with pride, because that can be a slippery slope, but you carry yourself with confidence, with the confidence of knowing that you're a part of something amazing, and that for that, you are beautiful, that you bring so much possibility, potential, energy, and vision to this planet, to the societies that we live in, and to the communities that we call home. It's very important that every single one of you carry that every single day. It's also about economics. One of our biggest challenges in California, as we look to advance a marketplace that does provide opportunity to small businesses, is a system that has grown so entrenched in the conglomerate style that they don't even know how to talk to 400 small businesses. They don't even know what to make of us. They look and they're like, oh my goodness, who are you? What are you doing here? Most trade associations in Sacramento, they have 10 members. They write $100,000 checks, they call it good. Well, we don't. Our membership starts at $100. And for $100, every single person expects that they get to write the entire strategic plan. A $100 member gets to decide everything. And if they're not heard, if they don't get their way, then they weren't heard. And so how do we get there? We stop fighting. We're not fighting a war on drugs anymore. We're building the peace that comes after the war. They're going to continue to fight us for some time to come. But having the courage to be constructive, to not respond, to stay focused on the truth that we found, to share that truth with confidence, with a smile, with understanding, with compassion for where everybody is coming from. It's going to be very important. So we're not going to fight with folks outside of our community. We're going to build peace. But we're going to do that internally as well. Within our own community, we are going to find ways to build peace. We achieved it in a limited sense. I'll call it a ceasefire by creating the license types that we did. For the last 10 years, the outdoor growers have fought over what's a small farm. Finally, I picked a number and said, I don't really care about what you guys say. I've heard from 4,000 of you. You still haven't agreed. We're picking 10,000 square feet, a quarter of an acre, and we're calling it good. And we're going to move forward. And so we've done that again with the different categories of licenses. And we're creating ways of managing conflict. We have this entrenched idea that we need to resolve conflict. Well, let me tell you something. It's not going to happen. Jed, I love you. We don't agree on everything. We are in conflict on some specific things, and that's okay. But we manage it. We manage it in a way that we can turn it into productivity. And in that love and in that respect, we're able to see that I didn't get 100% of my way, neither did he, but you know what? This individual, this being that is so fantastic and amazing got 70%, and so did I. And then we expand it out to the entire room, and we focus on that respect, and we focus on managing the conflict and not resolving it, of harnessing it, of turning it into the engine that drives dialogue, because ultimately at the end of the day, the only way we get solutions that draw us together is through that process. And so next time you hear somebody say something to the effect of, well, indoor has a huge carbon footprint and it's not sustainable and we should put all the plants under the sun, hear that. That's okay. Or vice versa. It's easier to control it indoor, it's more secure, it's safer. Hear that. I use this example because it's one of the most divisive themes within California. Not sure if you guys are having that conversation here. Hear that. Trust me, there's ways for both. There's ways to balance, there's ways to build together. And that's what we really need to focus on. I'm going to end and hopefully hear from you guys. I'd love to talk a little bit more collaboratively and back and forth. But I want to say most importantly, just to really underscore this point, the courage to accept, and I say this knowing exactly how out of touch it sounds, but the courage to accept that the war is over if we let it. The war is over if we find peace and if we show the world the love and the compassion that we've found and we share that freely and confidently at every opportunity that we get. The war is over. And there is nothing that makes me more excited than the thought of working with every single one of you to build the peace, to build the future, to build the economies, the farms, the marketplaces that we need, not just to get the best cannabis in the world to the patients and consumers who want or need it, but to actually fundamentally change people on an individual level, our communities, our societies, the way we interact with natural resources, our economies, to fundamentally change the way the business has been done. I believe that we can build that peace. In fact, I'm confident in it. And every single day, you have my commitment to carry that message in every arena and in every conversation I have, from Sacramento to the hills to the urban communities. I will carry that. And what I would like to ask in return is that you do the same. Recognize that we are on the cutting edge. This conversation is difficult and challenging. There are disagreements. There will always be conflict. Let's manage it, starting in our own hearts. Let's manage it in the space between us. And let's accept and acknowledge the role that we are here to play, to build this peace that we've been waiting for so long. Thank you all so much. Yeah, there it is.
Now we're going to take questions. I want you to know 27 words changed an awful lot. So in honor of that and knowing what you were going to talk about, we have a flip chart in the corner. We want you, the Cannabis Alliance Board of Directors, want you to list any concerns that you have. Also give your name and your contact information. And the Board of Directors will try to address that concern as best they can, and they will communicate back to you based on the fact that one individual in 27 words changed an awful lot. So now we're going to open it up for questions for this wonderful speaker, Hezekiah. Deborah will work the back of the room. I'll work the front. Who's first? And that question. Next question. Let's go right here. Come on up, Jed. You've heard the rules.
You heard the rules. Hand on the shoulder. There we go.
Well, thank you very much, Hezekiah, for coming up from California. When we first met about a year ago, I was really impressed and resonated with Hezekiah's message, and that's why we wanted him to come up today, share with Washington State that actually working in unity can work, and in a greater scale in California, much bigger diversity in issues, the policy that is almost unfathomable. These guys pull it off, so big thank you. And but my question is, you mentioned third generation family farmer, and how do you bridge the gap from the roots of your being to maybe that urban setting? How do you, in your essence, go, I'm going to advocate for this individual's best interest?
What you don't know probably is that Hezekiah is one of they are now brothers. Jedediah is one of the board members for the Cannabis Alliance. Your answer, sir?
With a lot of intention. It didn't come easily and naturally, and it was part of the process where this application, I spent some time in Palestine, Israel, Jordan, depending on your slant, you can call it whatever you want, and working on conflict resolution there. And every report that I passed up the chain, I said we will never resolve this conflict. If you want, we were ultimately looking at water resource management and how to manage water in this most conflicted of areas. And the goal was always solve the conflict and then we'll manage the water. Well, no, we won't ever solve the conflict. This has been here for 5,000 years and it's not going away. But we need to manage the water, regardless. And so, it was really in that experience where this transition to conflict management over conflict resolution arose. And then it got pretty cynical and pessimistic after having spent some time there. Go figure, decided to come home where everything was easy and working great. Realized that a lot of those same conflict management realities existed here. And so it came with intention. It came with a realization that the unregulated agriculture, the unregulated industry was plaguing natural resources. There were public safety issues, and hardworking business owners were losing children simply for being business owners, amongst all of the other negative impacts. And so it became more important to make progress than to resolve those conflicts. Literally spent 100 hours trying to answer that question, what is a small farm? Well, it's 2,000 square feet. Well, it's 20,000 square feet. Well, it's 7,000. Literally 100 hours watching people argue. Finally, the response was, look, we can't make progress until we answer this question. We're going to manage this conflict actively. Every single meeting we have, we still rehash that argument, even though it's in law now. But we give people the opportunity to hear it and to manage it. And so, it's been very intentional in realizing that progress comes by working together, and that if I weren't drawing people together, creating safe space for people to talk and to be heard, even if they don't get their way, that's how we're going to make progress. And this is much bigger than any single farm or business. I mean, this is literally about fundamentally changing the world.
Next question, Deborah, do you have one back there? Nope. Next question.
Oh my goodness, this is easy. All right.
We've got two up front. Now, we like you. Oh, I like this. What a dirty old man. We like you to, when we ask you a question, actually look out at the audience so they can see who is asking it, so they can come and talk to you.
Well, I'm Crystal Oliver. I own a licensed marijuana farm here in Washington. And one of my questions is, how do you personally feel about the future of the small rural cannabis farmer in California?
Good question.
I think that the regulatory or the legislative framework that we passed is the most friendly to small and independent producers that was possible. Politics is the art of what's possible. I hedged my bets with my board so many times, told them, this is great, we'll get a third of it, we're going to keep working. Lo and behold, when it came back that all three of those policy priorities were in the legislation that did pass, with 70% votes in both houses. We had a last-minute policy committee the last day of session. There was fist slamming and objections from some of the larger, it was very amazing to see. And I point to, again, truth. We told the truth about what our agricultural sector could look like in 20 years if we embraced this new product and if we embraced this new culture. That said, the transition to regulation is going to be very difficult. The key to success over the last 50 years has been keeping a low profile and staying out of sight. A lot of those sites are in some of the most sensitive watershed areas in the state. My most recent job before doing this was as the director of the Watershed Restoration Council. I started working on this policy question to try to get people to store more water. One of the single policy pieces that's the biggest challenge, I think, is that in California, when you store water for more than 30 days, you lose your right to do it. And so a lot of times, just to sort of hedge, when you read about environmental crimes on a cannabis farm in California, that means they were storing water to not withdraw from the creeks. So keep that in mind. But I do feel very good. We estimate 55,000 small, independently owned farms in the state. We set our threshold that if 10,000 of them could be licensed in the first 3 years, that was probably a pretty breakthrough success. We had contact with 4,800 independent business owners over the last 2 months doing implementation workshops around the state, and the enthusiasm to get plugged in is there. And that is fundamentally the most important element, is a willingness to participate, and a willingness to participate in a system that's going to be very difficult. Paperwork, accounting, people are paying their workers great oftentimes, but that's very different than workers' comp and employment development. And this is going to be a very burdensome transition. We would like to see several thousands, if not several tens of thousands licensed. We think that the regulatory framework is there to absorb that, and now it's really up to us. And we talk about helping to transition the culture externally, but we have to meet in the middle. We have to transition our culture. And so I'm feeling good. We're seeing the enthusiasm. I think we're seeing the energy that we need to. Ultimately, at the end of the day, I think that California's leadership in this industry, and Washington's second tier leadership, just joking. I think that our leadership is built on values, and it's built on added values. Handcrafted products are more valuable. I think the marketplace could see a race to the bottom through homogenization, but ultimately, as long as our culture is there and the framework is there, I think we'll do all right. And I think we have those elements. So feeling more hopeful and optimistic than I imagined possible.
I represent a company that is bringing safe, effective, and unregulated products for pest control to this industry. And working closely with EPA and the regulators in the states, and to bring legal labels for the growers. I was curious, what is the stance of the growers in California on this approach?
Absolutely. I guess I should say absolutely positive or absolutely supportive. Fantastic. Guidance, information. I can tell you what I've always used, and even if it's appears innate at the time or benign at the time, it might not be. And having that research, having those labels, this is part of the cultural transition that we need to embrace that I was talking about. Just because I've always done it this way or because that was the way my grandpa told my mom told me to do it, doesn't mean that it's the best way to do it. And so absolutely supportive of those efforts. We did support provisions for the California Department of Pesticide Regulation to provide guidance. We obviously have challenges at the federal level, as I'm sure you're very well aware of, but very supportive. One of the things about California, given its size and the scope, I think that we can do a lot there that can start to spill out of our borders, and so we're very supportive. We should probably talk more about specifics at some point.
And just to let you know, EPA has provided a pathway for legal labels forward. So it was a game changer, and something I think is going to help get recognition as an ag commodity.
Absolutely.
We have another question back here.
Okay, you have one and I have one, and then that way.
I'll be quick this time, I promise. Succinct answers.
I'd just like to thank you, Hezekiah, for coming out. Your spirit, your call and commitment to unity is inspiring. You are sitting in a room that has representatives of both our legacy producers, some call them medical, as well as the new crop, some call that recreational or your I-502 system. The organizations that have come together as the Alliance have done everything in their power to do exactly what you were talking about. It's not everyone got exactly what they wanted. That was impossible. But really did our best to listen to one another and find a collective way forward. We are now been folded into a single paradigm. We're continuing as one force to try to improve upon that. But, a healing process has begun, and we're committed to that. And we want to see Washington move forward stronger together as one force and one voice. My question to you is, going through similar processes, and maybe the lines of division are similar, and in some ways they're different. What strategies have you found to be most useful in moving that dialogue forward? But also, what advice do you have for us here today in terms of coming together, working together, and transcending those differences, which can be contentious, but ultimately is incredibly important to everyone's future?
Sure. Well, first and foremost, just for clarification's sake, how many folks are from the greater Seattle urban area and around? How many people are from the eastern part of the state, southern and central? That's pretty solid, actually. The first thing I was going to say is be very intentional about getting out into geographies that are underrepresented. But that feels, for us, getting into LA was a critical piece of our challenge. But it feels like you guys have done pretty good. Everyone go back to your communities, let them know this room is for everybody, not just for the urban folks. Second thing, it's okay to be the dissenting vote. I'm 32 years old. I have 37 years combined experience on board of directors, and oftentimes I am the dissenting vote. It's okay to make a stand, but to do it with respect and love. And so don't feel like just because you didn't win a vote, then you've lost the conflict. Again, it's not about winning and losing. Those are tools to resolve. We're managing. You guys in this room are never going to agree. Get used to it. It's okay to be the no vote. It's okay to split a vote. Those things are part of the process. But something that everyone can do is not to force votes on existential questions. If there's somebody that's a part of your community, that's a part of your organization, and a policy decision will put them out of business, that's not an acceptable question to be asking. We absolutely fundamentally have to find a way to have a conversation that allows everyone to have a future. It's not to say that every business is going to succeed. The marketplace is an unforgiving place. That's okay. It's okay to cast a no vote. It's okay to lose a vote, but we shouldn't be voting on existential questions. And that would be my advice. And stick with it. It's tough. It's patient. They're going to say mean things. They're going to throw rotten tomatoes. That's all right. You're not here because you're weak. You're not here because you don't believe. You're here because you see this, you know the truth, and you're willing, you have the courage to stand up for it. So that's my nutshell, succinct advice, because I know we're a little bit late.
One final question, please. Come forward. And you are?
Sue Sisley, I'm a physician. I wanted to ask about the designation for the cannabis as an agricultural product. It does seem like not just a huge symbolic victory, but a giant tangible victory that that you mentioned that other states might be able to tackle. And I'm wondering if the legislation that you passed, I was just looking on your website, and it lists a few bill numbers. I'm wondering if you can lead us to which bill it was, and if you think that's model language that we should try to replicate verbatim, or you think we should, you know, if you can help us develop some model language that we can try to work on in other states to try to achieve a similar victory.
Sure, absolutely. Senate Bill 643 from Senator Mike McGuire is the bill that actually does the heavy lifting. It's a grand total, it's one sentence, it literally, for the purposes of this chapter, and marijuana, they use marijuana. Marijuana shall be considered an agricultural product. It's very simple and easy. I know how our ag department is set up. It would probably take about half an hour to figure out how the ag code in other states is set up and how to best tie into it. I do think it's replicable. SB 643 from Senator McGuire is really where you're going to look for that. And we are expecting some cleanup this year to tie it into more pieces of the Food and Ag Code. And so that will probably be an 80-21 introduced this session the other day. And so as that moves forward, we're just about to get our updates on the new bills and new legislation on the website. I do think it's replicable. I do think it's a worthy cause, and I would strongly encourage folks to reach out to me or anyone who is down there and in the know for guidance on that. So thank you. Thanks, guys.
A round of appreciation.